Amelia Jane's fingers trembled as the iron shackles bit into her wrists, the crude metal a stark contrast to the white wedding dress they had forced her to wear. The stagecoach rattled westward toward Ventura, California, and with every mile, her heart hardened against the man who had purchased her as his bride, a man she had never met, whose name she barely knew, but whose cruelty she was already beginning to understand. The year was 1872, and at 20 years old, Amelia had known little kindness since her father's death 6 months ago. Left with debts and no protection, she had become easy prey for Silas Harrington, a wealthy land baron who collected beautiful things and people with callous disregard for their wishes. "Stop your crying, girl," the escort beside her growled, a burly man with tobacco-stained teeth. "Mr. Harrington paid good money for you. Most girls would be grateful for being sold." Amelia's voice quivered with both rage and fear. "For being shackled like a criminal," the man laughed. "The shackles are just to make sure you reach your wedding day. Mr. Harrington heard about your last escape attempt." Amelia turned to the window, watching the landscape change from the lush greenery of her native Tennessee to increasingly arid terrain. The journey had taken weeks, and now they were in the final stretch to Ventura, where Harrington awaited with a preacher and the mockery of a wedding ceremony. "You'll learn to appreciate your good fortune," the escort continued. "Plenty of women out here would kill for the security of marriage to a man like Harrington." Amelia didn't respond. Her mind was racing, searching for any opportunity to flee, though the shackles made that nearly impossible. She had tried escaping once before, in Denver, but had been caught within hours and punished with these iron restraints that now cut into her skin. The stagecoach lurched suddenly, throwing Amelia against the side panel. Outside, shouts erupted, followed by the thunder of hoofbeats. The escort cursed, reaching for his revolver. "Bandits," he hissed. "Stay down and keep quiet." But these weren't ordinary bandits. As the coach screeched to a halt, Amelia caught sight of a lone rider through the window, his face partially obscured by a bandana. Unlike the disheveled outlaws she'd seen in towns along their journey, this man sat tall in his saddle, his movements precise and controlled. "Step out with your hands visible," the stranger called, his voice carrying authority despite its softness. The escort hesitated, his gun half drawn. "I'm escorting precious cargo for Silas Harrington. You'd be wise to move along, mister." "I didn't ask who you work for," the stranger replied. "I said step out." What happened next unfolded in a blur. The escort lunged through the door, firing wildly. A single shot rang out in response, and the escort crumpled to the ground, clutching his shoulder. The driver had already raised his hands in surrender. Amelia pressed herself against the far corner of the coach, her shackled hands held protectively before her. The stranger dismounted and approached the vehicle with measured steps. When he opened the door, sunlight silhouetted his tall frame. "Madam," he said, tipping his hat slightly. His eyes widened at the sight of her shackles. "Seems like you're in a predicament. Are you one of Harrington's men?" She asked, her voice steadier than she felt. The man shook his head slowly, blue eyes studying her with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "No, madam. Name's Ethan O'Malley, and I don't much care for men who chain women in wedding dresses." He reached to his belt and unsheathed a knife, the blade catching the California sun. Amelia flinched, but instead of threatening her, he knelt before her. "Hold still," he said, voice gentle as he inserted the blade between her wrist and the first shackle. With skill that spoke of experience, he manipulated the lock until it clicked open. He repeated the process with the second shackle, freeing her completely. The iron restraints fell to the floor of the stagecoach with a heavy thud. "Why would you help me?" Amelia asked, rubbing her raw wrists. "You don't know me." Ethan O'Malley's expression darkened. "I know Silas Harrington, that's enough reason." He glanced at the driver who was watching them nervously. "Your driver's going to take your escort to the doctor in the next town. You have a choice, Miss Jane." "Amelia Jane," she supplied. "Miss Jane. You can continue to Ventura and your arranged marriage, or you can ride with me. I have a small ranch about a day's ride from here. You'd be safe there until you figure out your next step." Amelia hesitated. Trusting a stranger seemed foolish, but the alternative was unthinkable. "How do I know I can trust you?" A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "You don't, but I just cut off your shackles instead of dragging you to Harrington. That ought to count for something." She studied him for a long moment. Despite the dust of the trail, his clothes were well kept. His eyes held a direct, honest gaze that contrasted sharply with the shifty looks of Harrington's men. Most tellingly, he had offered her a choice, something no one had done in months. "I'll go with you," she decided, "but I want your word that you'll respect my wishes." "You have it," Ethan said, extending his hand to help her from the coach, "and an O'Malley's word is bond." As Amelia stepped from the stagecoach, she realized she was taking the first truly free breath she'd had in months. The air smelled of sage and freedom, and despite the uncertainty ahead, her heart felt lighter than it had since her father's death. Ethan helped her onto his horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion, before mounting behind her. "Hold on," he instructed, his voice close to her ear. "It's rough country between here and home." As they rode away from the stagecoach, Amelia clutched the wedding dress's fabric to keep it from tangling. The garment that had been meant to symbolize her captivity now fluttered in the wind like a flag of rebellion. "Mr. O'Malley," she said over her shoulder, "I don't know how I'll repay you for this kindness." "Call me Ethan," he replied. "And staying out of Harrington's clutches is payment enough. Man's been poisoning this territory for years." They rode until sunset, stopping only briefly to rest the horse. Ethan was a man of few words, but each one seemed carefully chosen. He told her he'd come to California after the war, seeking a fresh start away from the devastation that had claimed his family in Virginia. His ranch was modest but growing, with a small herd of cattle and plans for more. "What about you?" he asked as they continued their journey through the gathering dusk. "How did you end up in Shackles in a stagecoach?" Amelia sighed, the painful memories still fresh. "My father died last winter. We had a small farm in Tennessee. I thought it was profitable, but it seems father had debts I never knew about. Harrington's men came with papers claiming he'd bought the debt. They said I could work it off or marry Harrington." She paused. "When I refused both, they simply took me." Ethan's arms tightened slightly around her as he held the reins. "That's not legal, even out here. The law hasn't seemed particularly concerned with what happens to women without family to protect them," she said bitterly. "Fair point," Ethan conceded. "But Harrington usually maintains at least the appearance of legality. Makes me wonder what he's really after." The question hung in the air as they rode on through the deepening night. When they finally reached Ethan's ranch, Amelia was nearly asleep against his chest, exhaustion overwhelming her fear and uncertainty. The ranch house was modest but sturdy, with a wide porch and a chimney of native stone. A barn stood nearby, along with a corral containing several horses. The whole property nestled in a small valley with hills providing natural protection from the elements. "It's not much," Ethan said as he helped her dismount, "but it's mine, free and clear." "It's beautiful," Amelia replied honestly, taking in the moonlit landscape. Inside, Ethan lit a lamp and showed her to a small bedroom. "This was meant for family someday," he explained, somewhat awkwardly. There's a lock on the door. Use it if it makes you feel safer." The simple acknowledgement of her need for security touched Amelia deeply. "Thank you." After Ethan left to tend to his horse, Amelia explored the room. A simple bed with clean linens, a washstand with a pitcher and basin, and a small chest of drawers were the only furnishings. It was plain but clean, and after weeks of travel in increasingly degrading conditions, it seemed like luxury. She removed the wedding dress, letting it pool on the floor like a discarded ghost. Beneath it, she wore a simple chemise and petticoat. Without proper nightclothes, these would have to do. She washed her face and hands in the basin, then sat on the edge of the bed, reality slowly settling over her. She had escaped Harrington, but for how long? A man who would put shackles on a bride wouldn't simply let her go. And what of this stranger who had rescued her? Ethan O'Malley seemed honorable, but she had been deceived before. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Miss Jane, I've left some food for you on the table when you're ready, and there's a trunk in the main room with some clothing that might fit you. They belonged to my sister before she married and moved north." Amelia opened the door a crack. "Your sister won't mind." Ethan's expression softened. "She'd be furious if I didn't offer. Get some rest, Miss Jane. You're safe here tonight." After he walked away, Amelia found herself believing him, despite all the reasons her experience told her not to trust. Perhaps it was exhaustion, or perhaps it was something in those steady blue eyes, but for the first time in months, she allowed herself to hope. The following morning, Amelia woke to sunlight streaming through a small window. For a moment, disorientation gripped her, until the events of the previous day came rushing back. She was free, at least temporarily, from Harrington's clutches, in the home of a stranger who had cut her shackles with his knife. She dressed quickly in a simple blue dress from the trunk Ethan had mentioned. It was a bit loose, but clean and whole, which was more than could be said for anything she had worn in weeks. She carefully folded the wedding dress and placed it in the bottom drawer of the chest, unable to discard it entirely despite what it represented. It might prove useful later, though the thought made her shudder. In the main room of the house, she found a simple breakfast laid out: biscuits, bacon, and coffee that still steamed. Through the window she could see Ethan in the corral, working with a young horse. His movements were patient and gentle, a stark contrast to the violence she had witnessed when he confronted her escort. Amelia stepped outside, the morning air crisp and invigorating. Ethan noticed her and nodded in greeting, finishing his work with the horse before approaching. "The clothes fit well enough?" he asked, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Yes, thank you, and for breakfast as well." Ethan gestured toward a bench on the porch. "We should talk about what happens next. Harrington will notice when his bride doesn't arrive." Amelia sat, arranging the borrowed dress around her. "How do you know Harrington?" A shadow crossed Ethan's face. "We've had dealings. He's been trying to buy my land for 2 years. Offers kept getting less friendly." He glanced at her. "But that doesn't explain why he'd go to such lengths to bring a bride from Tennessee when there are plenty of women in California who'd marry him for his money." Amelia's hands twisted in her lap. "My father was a surveyor before he turned to farming. He traveled through the Western Territories in his youth. He used to tell me stories." She hesitated. "Before he died, he gave me his old journals, said they might be valuable someday. I brought them with me, hidden in my trunks, but one of Harrington's men took them in Denver." Ethan's expression sharpened with interest. "What was in those journals?" "Maps, mostly. Observations about the land, water sources, mineral deposits. Father was meticulous in his documentation. And let me guess, some of those observations were about land near here." Amelia nodded. "Father spent nearly a year surveying parts of California. He mentioned Ventura specifically. Ethan stood abruptly. Harrington's been buying up land all around this valley. Word is he's expecting the railroad to come through, but no one knows the planned route. His eyes met hers. Except someone with detailed surveys from 20 years ago might have a good idea. You think that's why he arranged to buy me along with my father's debts? For old journals, information is valuable out here. Routes for the railroad even more so. Ethan paced the length of the porch. If Harrington knows where the railroad's likely to go, he could buy up land for pennies and sell it for dollars once the route is announced. Amelia felt cold despite the morning sun. Then he won't stop looking for me. No, Ethan agreed grimly. He won't. The reality of her situation descended on Amelia like a physical weight. She had escaped one trap only to find herself in deeper danger. I should leave. My presence puts you at risk. And go where? Ethan challenged. With no money, no family, and Harrington's men likely already searching. No, Miss Jane, running isn't the answer. Then what is? She demanded, frustration breaking through her careful composure. I won't go to Harrington, and I won't bring trouble to your door after you've shown me nothing but kindness. Ethan's expression softened. We'll figure something out. First, we need to retrieve those journals if we can. They might be our best leverage. Leverage for what? To convince Harrington to leave us both alone. Ethan's gaze turned toward the distant hills. I have friends in town who might help. We'll ride in tomorrow. Amelia wanted to argue further but recognized the logic in his plan. Without the journals, she was simply a runaway bride, easily discredited if she tried to expose Harrington's schemes. With them, she had proof of what he was really after. Until then, Ethan continued, I'll show you around the ranch. If anyone comes looking, there's a root cellar under the house and a hidden spot in the barn, just in case. The day passed in a blur of activity. Ethan showed her the ranch operations, the small herd of cattle, the vegetable garden behind the house, the spring that provided clean water year-round. He introduced her to his two ranch hands, Miguel and Thomas, who lived in a small bunkhouse near the barn. Both men were respectful, though curious about her presence. Told them you're my cousin, visiting from back east, Ethan explained as they walked back toward the house. Fewer questions that way. And they believed that? Amelia asked skeptically. Ethan's mouth quirked in a half-smile. They know better than to disbelieve me to my face. Besides, your clothes help with the story. As evening approached, Amelia insisted on preparing dinner, grateful for the chance to repay some small part of Ethan's hospitality. She found the kitchen well stocked, but showing clear signs of a bachelor's priorities, plenty of coffee and staples, but few luxuries. She managed to prepare a respectable meal of beef stew and biscuits, which Ethan praised with genuine appreciation. They ate at the small table in the main room, the lamp casting warm light over their faces. You cook better than I do, Ethan commented as he finished his second helping. That's not saying much, but still. Amelia smiled, the expression feeling strange after weeks of fear and grief. My father and I took care of each other after my mother died. I learned to make do with what we had. Where in Tennessee was your farm? Outside Nashville. Nothing grand, but the soil was good. We grew corn mostly, some tobacco. Her voice softened with nostalgia. It was beautiful in spring. You miss it, Ethan observed. I miss what it was, she corrected. But that life ended with my father. She met his gaze directly. What about you? What brought you all the way to California? Ethan was quiet for a moment, considering his response. The war changed everything. My family's plantation was destroyed. My father and older brother killed at Antietam. Mother didn't survive the winter after the surrender. His voice remained steady, but Amelia could hear the controlled pain beneath the words. I headed west because there was nothing left for me in Virginia except ghosts. I'm sorry, Amelia said softly. It was a long time ago. 8 years now. That doesn't mean it stopped hurting. Ethan looked at her with something like surprise, as if unaccustomed to being understood. No, it doesn't. But this land helps, building something new. They fell into comfortable silence as Amelia cleared the dishes. Outside, the California night was filled with unfamiliar sounds: coyotes in the distance, the soft nickering of horses in the barn, wind through sage and chaparral instead of the pine forests of Tennessee. We should leave at first light tomorrow, Ethan said as she returned to the table. It's a 3-hour ride to town. We'll find Samuel Wilson first. He's the clerk at the land office and a good friend. If anyone knows what Harrington's been up to, it's Sam. And if we find the journals, then we'll have decisions to make. Ethan met her eyes steadily. But whatever happens, Miss Jane, know that you have choices now. I won't decide your path for you. The simple promise, so different from the controlling demands of her recent life, brought unexpected tears to Amelia's eyes. She blinked them away quickly, unwilling to seem weak when strength was what she needed most. Thank you, Mr. O'Malley, she said, her voice just above a whisper, for everything. Later, in the quiet of the borrowed bedroom, Amelia tried to make sense of her turbulent emotions. In just 2 days, her life had transformed completely. The forced marriage she had dreaded had been replaced by uncertainty, frightening in its own way, but alive with possibility rather than despair. And then, there was Ethan O'Malley himself. She had no illusions about romantic rescue. Her experiences had taught her that people rarely acted without self-interest. Yet she couldn't deny the integrity she sensed in him, or the way his quiet strength made her feel secure for the first time in months. She fell asleep wondering what tomorrow would bring, and whether the fragile freedom she had found could possibly last. Dawn arrived with a gentle knock at her door. Miss Jane, it's time to go if we're to reach town by mid-morning. Amelia dressed quickly in the simplest of her borrowed dresses, a brown cotton that wouldn't attract attention. She plaited her dark hair into a practical braid and pinched her cheeks for color. The mirror above the washstand reflected a woman she barely recognized, thinner than before, with shadows beneath her eyes, but with a determination that was new. In the main room, Ethan waited with a small bundle. Breakfast to eat on the trail, he explained. And I found this. He handed her a small revolver, its handle worn smooth with use. It was my sister's, he said when Amelia hesitated. Nothing fancy, but it's accurate at close range. 5 shots. Do you know how to use it? My father taught me, she admitted, accepting the weapon. It felt heavy in her hand, a responsibility as much as a protection. Though I've never fired at anything but targets. Let's hope that doesn't change today. Ethan paused. The Derringer's small enough to hide in your pocket. Anyone looking at you should see just another respectable woman in town for shopping. The implications were clear. They were walking into potential danger, and Ethan was ensuring she could protect herself if they were separated. The thought sent a chill through her, but also a curious sense of empowerment. He wasn't trying to shield her from reality or make decisions for her. They rode double again, Amelia seated in front of Ethan on his chestnut stallion. The borrowed dress hiked up around her calves, but propriety seemed a distant concern compared to the dangers ahead. They spoke little during the journey, both lost in their own thoughts as the landscape changed from the sheltered valley of the ranch to more open country. As they crested a hill, Ventura came into view below them, a bustling town nestled between mountains and sea. The Pacific stretched blue and limitless beyond the buildings, a sight that momentarily took Amelia's breath away. It's beautiful, she murmured. It is, Ethan agreed. worth protecting from men like Harrington. They approached town from the north, avoiding the main road. Ethan explained that Harrington owned the largest hotel and had men watching the usual routes into Ventura. Instead, they left the horse at a small livery owned by another of Ethan's friends and entered town on foot, walking separately to attract less attention. The land office was a modest building near the town center. Inside, a bespectacled man looked up from his paperwork as they entered, his expression brightening at the sight of Ethan. "O'Malley, didn't expect you in town today." His curious gaze moved to Amelia. "Sam, this is Miss Amelia Jane." "Miss Jane, Samuel Wilson, the most knowledgeable man in the county when it comes to land matters." Samuel rose and bowed slightly. "A pleasure, Miss Jane. Any friend of Ethan's is welcome here." Ethan closed the door behind them and lowered his voice. "We need your help, Sam. It's about Harrington." The clerk's friendly expression sobered immediately. "What's he done now?" Briefly, Ethan explained Amelia's situation, omitting only the details about the journals. "We need to know what Harrington's planning. Why bring a bride all the way from Tennessee?" Samuel removed his spectacles and polished them thoughtfully. "There's been talk. Harrington's been buying every parcel he can get between here and Santa Barbara, especially along certain routes. Paying top dollar too, which isn't like him." "The railroad," Ethan suggested. "That's the rumor." "Word is he got his hands on inside information about the proposed route." Samuel's eyes narrowed. "But if Miss Jane was brought here against her will, that's a criminal matter. You should speak with Sheriff Matthews." "Matthews is in Harrington's pocket," Ethan countered. "Has been since the election." Samuel couldn't deny this. "True enough. So what are you planning to do? Find evidence of what Harrington's really up to?" He took something from Miss Jane that might prove it, journals with detailed land surveys from years ago. Understanding dawned on Samuel's face. That would explain a lot. If he has maps showing the likely route for the railroad before it's officially announced. "He could make a fortune," Amelia finished, "at the expense of every honest rancher and farmer in the region. And if you could prove it." Samuel asked. "Then we'd have leverage," Ethan said grimly. "Enough to convince him to leave Miss Jane and my ranch alone." Samuel considered this, drumming his fingers on his desk. "Harrington keeps an office above the Ventura Hotel. That's where he'd likely store anything valuable. But getting in there won't be easy. We need a distraction," Ethan mused. "Something to draw Harrington and his men away from the hotel." A slow smile spread across Samuel's face. "As it happens, there's a town meeting tonight about water rights. Harrington's expected to attend. He's been trying to buy control of the creek that supplies the eastern farms. 8 o'clock at the town hall." "That might work," Ethan nodded. "Harrington never misses a chance to intimidate the smaller landowners at those meetings." "What about his men?" Amelia asked. "Surely he doesn't leave his property unguarded." "No, but most of them drink at the saloon across from the hotel. A well-timed commotion might pull them away long enough." Ethan turned to Samuel. "Could you help with that?" The clerk adjusted his spectacles nervously. "I'm not much for creating disturbances, Ethan. You wouldn't have to. Just make sure word reaches the right people that I'm in town." Ethan's expression hardened. "There are plenty who'd welcome a chance to settle old scores with me, especially after some liquid courage." Amelia looked at him with new concern. "You'd use yourself as bait. That's too dangerous." "It's the best chance we have," Ethan replied. "Besides, I don't plan to actually be there when they come looking. Just the rumor should be enough to draw attention." Samuel still seemed hesitant. "If Harrington discovers you're interfering in his business, he won't stop at threats, Ethan. You know that." "I do, which is why we need those journals." Ethan's determination was unshakable. "Will you help us, Sam? The clerk sighed heavily. "You know I will, but be careful, both of you. Harrington's influence reaches further than you might think." They spent the remainder of the afternoon finalizing their plan. Samuel would spread word that Ethan was in town, angry and looking for Harrington, a rumor certain to reach the ears of Harrington's men at the saloon. Meanwhile, Ethan and Amelia would wait for the town meeting to begin, then use the distraction to access Harrington's office above the hotel. As evening approached, tension mounted. They took a simple meal at a small cafe where they were unlikely to be recognized, then separated to avoid being seen together. Amelia found herself alone for the first time since her rescue, walking the streets of Ventura with the small revolver concealed in her pocket. The town was livelier than she had expected, with businesses still open and people moving purposefully along the wooden sidewalks. She passed the Ventura Hotel, a 3-story building that dominated the main street, its windows glowing with lamplight. Somewhere inside was the office where Harrington might be keeping her father's journals, and with them, her best hope for freedom. At precisely 8 o'clock, she watched from the shadows as Silas Harrington himself emerged from the hotel, flanked by 2 men. Even at a distance, the sight of him sent a chill through her. Tall and imposing, with a silver-streaked beard and expensive clothes, he carried himself with the confidence of a man accustomed to getting his way. They headed toward the town hall, where other citizens were already gathering for the meeting. As they disappeared inside, Amelia made her way to the alley behind the hotel, where Ethan had arranged to meet her. He was already waiting, his expression tense but focused. "Harrington's at the meeting." "Yes, with 2 men, but there are probably more inside the hotel." Ethan nodded. "Sam's done his part. I passed the saloon on my way here. There's already a group of men working themselves up, looking for me. When they finally decide to search the town, that should pull most of Harrington's remaining men away from the hotel." Sure enough, within minutes, a commotion erupted from the direction of the saloon. Raised voices, then the sound of breaking glass, followed by the thunder of boots on wooden sidewalks as a group of men spilled into the street. "Now," Ethan said, leading her toward the back entrance of the hotel. "The service stairs should be less watched." The rear door was unlocked, as Samuel had predicted. They slipped inside, finding themselves in a dimly lit corridor that led to the kitchen. A single lamp illuminated the narrow service stairs beyond. They ascended quietly, Ethan leading the way. The second floor contained guest rooms, most occupied judging by the sounds of conversation and movement behind closed doors. They continued to the 3rd floor, which housed offices and Harrington's private suite. "This way," Ethan whispered, guiding her down a carpeted hallway. According to Sam, Harrington's office is the last door on the right. They reached the door without incident, but as expected, it was locked. Ethan produced a set of small tools from his pocket and set to work on the lock, his movements quick and practiced. "Where did you learn that?" Amelia whispered, keeping watch on the hallway. "The war," Ethan replied softly, his focus on the lock. "Skills you don't forget." The lock clicked open and they slipped inside, closing the door quietly behind them. The office was lavishly appointed, with a massive desk of polished mahogany, leather chairs and bookshelves lining one wall. A crystal decanter of amber liquid sat on a silver tray, catching the moonlight that streamed through the window. "Look for a safe," Ethan instructed, moving toward the desk. Anything valuable would be locked away. Amelia searched the room methodically, checking behind paintings and examining the bookshelves for hidden compartments. She found nothing until she noticed that the large carpet had been recently disturbed on one side, its fringe uneven. "Here," she called softly, rolling back the carpet to reveal a trapdoor in the wooden floor. It was secured with a padlock, newer than the surrounding wood. Ethan knelt beside her, examining the lock. "This will take time." He set to work with his tools, his brow furrowed in concentration. Minutes passed with excruciating slowness, each small sound from elsewhere in the hotel causing them to freeze. Finally, the padlock opened with a soft click. Ethan carefully lifted the trapdoor to reveal a small compartment containing several document boxes and a leather satchel. "Which one?" he asked, looking to Amelia for guidance. She examined the items, her heart racing. "The satchel. Father always kept his most important papers in something he could carry easily." Ethan lifted out the satchel and opened it, revealing several leather-bound journals with faded ink on their covers. Amelia recognized her father's handwriting immediately. "These are his," she confirmed, emotion tightening her throat. She opened one journal to the middle, finding the precise maps and notations that had been her father's life's work. "And look." She pointed to a detailed drawing of what appeared to be a railway route through the coastal mountains, with Ventura marked prominently. "This must be what Harrington wants." "We need to go," Ethan urged, helping her return the other items to the compartment. "We've been lucky so far," but the sound of voices in the hallway cut him off. They froze, listening as two men approached the office door, their conversation becoming clearer. "Harrington wants those survey books ready to show the railroad men tomorrow," one voice said. "Said not to disturb him at the meeting unless it's an emergency." "This counts," the second voice replied. "If O'Mal is really in town causing trouble, he'll want to know." The doorknob turned, and Ethan pulled Amelia behind the desk just as the door opened. Two of Harrington's men entered, one holding a lamp that cast long shadows across the room. "Check the safe," the first man instructed. "Make sure everything's still there." The second man moved toward the rolled-back carpet, then stopped abruptly. "Wait, someone's been here." He dropped to his knees, examining the open trapdoor. "The safe's been opened." Both men drew their guns, scanning the room. "Come out now, and maybe we won't shoot," the first called, his voice betraying his nervousness. Ethan squeezed Amelia's hand once, then whispered, "Run for the door when I move." Before she could protest, he stood, hands raised. "Evening, gentlemen," he said calmly, drawing their attention. "Looking for me." The momentary confusion was all Amelia needed. She slipped from behind the desk and bolted for the door, clutching the satchel with her father's journals. Behind her, she heard the sounds of a struggle, then a gunshot that seemed to shake the entire building. She didn't stop, racing down the hallway toward the service stairs, her heart pounding in her ears. Footsteps followed, whether Ethan's or one of Harrington's men. She couldn't tell. Reaching the stairs, she practically flew down them, nearly colliding with a startled kitchen worker at the bottom. She pushed past him and out the back door into the alley, the cool night air hitting her flushed face. "Miss Jane," Ethan's voice from just behind her. She turned to see him emerging from the hotel, a bloody gash across his forehead but otherwise intact. "This way, quickly." They ran together through the back alleys of Ventura, avoiding the main streets where Harrington's men would surely be searching for them. The commotion at the hotel had already drawn attention. Shouts echoed behind them, and in the distance, they could hear the town sheriff calling for order. Ethan led her to the small livery where they had left his horse. The elderly stableman looked up in alarm as they burst in. "Trouble, O'Malley?" he asked, taking in their disheveled appearance. "The usual kind, Joe. We need to go now." The man nodded, already moving to saddle the chestnut stallion. "Harrington's men were by earlier asking questions. Told them I hadn't seen you in weeks." "Good man," Ethan said, pressing coins into Joe's palm. "If anyone asks, you were never here," Joe finished. "Now go, before they think to check here again." Minutes later, they were galloping out of town, taking a different route than the one they had used earlier. Amelia clung to Ethan with one arm, the precious satchel secured inside her dress against her body. Behind them, Ventura gradually faded into the darkness, the sounds of pursuit growing fainter. They rode hard for an hour before Ethan finally slowed the horse to a walk, allowing the animal to recover its breath. They had entered a wooded area, the trail barely visible in the moonlight. "Are you hurt?" Amelia asked, noticing the blood still trickling from the cut on Ethan's forehead. "It's nothing," he assured her. "One of them got in a lucky hit with his pistol before I could disarm him. They're both alive, but they'll have headaches when they wake up." Relief flooded through her. Despite the circumstances, she hadn't wanted blood on her hands or on Ethan's because of her. "We got the journals," she said, patting the bulge beneath her dress. "All of them, I think." Ethan's expression was grim despite this success. "Harrington will know who took them. He'll come after us with everything he has now." "Then we need to use what we have," Amelia said, her mind racing ahead. "The journals prove he's using inside information about the railroad to buy land at unfair prices. That's corruption, isn't it? Something even his friends in the sheriff's office couldn't ignore, maybe," Ethan conceded. "But we'd need to get that information to someone who can actually do something about it. The territorial governor, perhaps, or federal authorities." "San Francisco," Amelia suggested. "Surely there are honest officials there who would listen." Ethan considered this. "It's possible, but San Francisco is a long journey, and Harrington will have men watching the usual routes and transport." They continued riding, discussing options as the night deepened around them. Neither mentioned returning to Ethan's ranch. It would be the first place Harrington would look for them. Instead, Ethan guided them toward the mountains, where he knew of an old trapper's cabin that might serve as temporary shelter. Dawn was breaking when they finally reached the cabin, a simple one-room structure nestled in a small clearing. It had clearly been abandoned for some time, but the roof was intact, and the stone fireplace would provide warmth against the mountain chill. "We'll rest here today," Ethan said as he helped Amelia dismount. The long ride had left them both exhausted, their nerves frayed by the constant vigilance required. "Tomorrow we'll decide our next move." Inside, the cabin was dusty but serviceable. A crude bed frame stood against one wall, a table and 2 chairs in the center. Ethan set about building a fire while Amelia examined the journals more carefully, searching for anything that might help their situation. "These surveys are remarkably detailed," she said, turning pages carefully. "Father mapped every creek, every hill, even soil types in some areas. And look here, notes about potential routes for roads and railways, with calculations about grades and curves." Ethan joined her at the table, looking over her shoulder at the open journal. "Your father was thorough," he observed. "This information would be invaluable to someone planning major land purchases or development." "There's more," Amelia said, opening a different journal. "Father discovered gold deposits in the mountains north of Ventura. Not large enough for a rush," he noted, "but certainly profitable for whoever owned the land." She looked up, understanding dawning. "It's not just about the railroad. Harrington wants the mineral rights too. A man like that never stops at one scheme when he can have several," Ethan said grimly. "No wonder he went to such lengths to get these journals." And to get her, Amelia realized. The forced marriage wasn't just about the journals, it was to ensure her silence about what was in them. As Harrington's wife, she would have no legal right to speak against him or claim her father's discoveries as her own. They spent the day examining the journals and formulating a plan. The most promising option seemed to be reaching the telegraph office in Santa Barbara. where they could send a message to the territorial governor and possibly to the railroad company itself, exposing Harrington's manipulation. As evening approached, exhaustion finally overcame them. Ethan insisted Amelia take the bed while he would sleep near the fire. She was too tired to argue, though she felt guilty about the arrangement. "You've done so much for me," she said as she settled onto the thin mattress. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you." Ethan looked up from where he was banking the fire for the night. "You don't need to repay me, Miss Jane. Some things are worth doing because they're right." In the flickering firelight, his face seemed younger, the habitual guardedness momentarily lifted. Amelia found herself wondering about the man behind the quiet strength, what dreams he had beyond his ranch, what wounds from the war he still carried. "Still," she persisted, "you've risked everything to help a stranger." "Not entirely a stranger anymore," Ethan said softly. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be challenging." Amelia closed her eyes, lulled by the crackling fire and the distant sounds of the forest. Despite their precarious situation, she felt strangely at peace, safer with this man she barely knew than she had felt in months. She woke sometime in the night to the sound of voices outside the cabin. Ethan was already on his feet, revolver in hand, moving silently to the window. "Harrington's men," he whispered, confirming her worst fears. "At least 4 of them, maybe more in the trees." Amelia rose quickly, gathering the journals into the satchel. "How did they find us? Probably tracked us from town. I was careful about our trail, but not careful enough." Ethan's expression was taut with concentration. "There's a back window, barely big enough to squeeze through. When I create a distraction, I want you to take the journals and go." "I'm not leaving you," Amelia protested. "This isn't a debate," Ethan said firmly. "Those journals are the only leverage we have. If Harrington gets them back, we have nothing." Before she could argue further, a voice called from outside. "O'Malley, we know you're in there. Send out the girl and the books and maybe we won't burn the cabin down around you." Ethan moved to the door. "I'll handle this. Be ready to move." "Wait," Amelia caught his arm, a desperate plan forming. "I have an idea." Quickly, she outlined a different approach, risky but potentially more effective than splitting up. Ethan listened, his initial skepticism giving way to reluctant agreement. "It might work. But if things go wrong, then we'll both be in trouble," she finished. "But at least we'll be together." Something shifted in his expression at her word's surprise, followed by a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. "Together, then," he agreed softly. They moved quickly, preparing for what would come next. Amelia positioned herself near the back window while Ethan stood ready at the door. "Last chance, O'Malley," the voice outside called. "Send her out now or we start shooting." Ethan opened the door a crack, keeping his body shielded. "I want to speak with Harrington himself," he called back. "Not his errand boys." A different voice responded, cultured, commanding, and chillingly familiar to Amelia. "I'm here, O'Malley, though I'm disappointed we're meeting under these circumstances." Silas Harrington had come himself, a fact that both terrified Amelia and confirmed the importance of what they possessed. Their plan might actually work if they survived the next few minutes. Ethan opened the door wider, stepping onto the small porch with his hands visible but not raised in surrender. "Harrington, unusual to see you so far from your comforts." From her position, Amelia could see Harrington standing in the clearing, surrounded by 6 armed men. He was impeccably dressed despite the hour and the rough terrain, his silver-streaked beard neatly trimmed, his posture commanding. "Some matters require personal attention," Harrington replied smoothly. "You've taken something that belongs to me. 2 things, actually." His eyes shifted, searching for Amelia in the doorway. "Where is she?" "Safe," Ethan said. as are the journals, but I'm willing to discuss terms. Harrington's eyebrows rose slightly. Terms? You're hardly in a position to negotiate, O'Malley. My men outnumber you, and there's nowhere for you to run. True, Ethan acknowledged. But if anything happens to me, copies of those journals along with detailed accounts of your schemes will reach the territorial governor and the railroad commission by noon tomorrow. It was a bluff, but a calculated one. They had no copies, but Harrington couldn't know that for certain. A flicker of unease crossed Harrington's face before his confident mask returned. An interesting claim, but I think you're overplaying your hand. Am I? Ethan took another step forward. Those journals document everything the gold deposits north of Ventura, the likely railroad routes, the water rights you've been quietly buying up. How will your friends in Sacramento react when they learn you've been manipulating land prices with insider information? While Ethan kept Harrington's attention, Amelia slipped through the back window as planned, the satchel of journals secured to her body. She moved silently through the trees, circling around to approach the clearing from behind Harrington's position. Harrington's composure was beginning to crack. What exactly do you want, O'Malley? Money, land, name your price. Simple, Ethan replied, his voice carrying clearly through the night air. You leave Miss Jane alone completely. No more pursuit, no more claims about debts or arranged marriages. She receives clear title to her father's property in Tennessee, and you stay away from my ranch. That's all, Harrington asked skeptically. You don't want to share in my ventures. Money for your silence, not interested in blood money, Ethan said flatly. Just want you to leave us in peace. Harrington considered this, his calculating mind visibly working behind his composed exterior. The girl I might concede. Her father's property is worthless to me, but the journals contain information that rightfully belongs to me. I purchased those survey rights along with the debts. No, a clear voice rang out from behind him. You didn't. Harrington whirled to find Amelia standing at the edge of the clearing, a revolver aimed steadily at his chest. His men tensed, hands moving to their weapons, but hesitated at the prospect of their employer being shot. Miss Jane, Harrington said, recovering quickly. I've been looking forward to meeting my bride properly. I was never your bride, Amelia replied, her voice remarkably steady despite her racing heart. And my father's work was never yours to claim. Such spirit, Harrington remarked, though his eyes had hardened. I can see why he wanted you specifically. He gestured vaguely toward Ethan. But surely you realize your position is untenable. Even if you shoot me, my men will kill you both. Perhaps, Amelia conceded. But you'll still be dead, and those copies of the journals will still reach the authorities. Ethan had moved to stand beside her, his own weapon drawn but pointed at Harrington's men rather than Harrington himself. It's over, Harrington. Take the deal. A tense silence fell over the clearing as Harrington weighed his options. Finally, he gave a small, tight smile. It seems I underestimated both of you. Very well. I accept your terms with one addition. I want those journals, the originals, not just your supposed copies. Amelia and Ethan exchanged glances. This was the most dangerous part of their plan. The journals were their only real leverage. Surrendering them meant trusting Harrington to keep his word. Half, Ethan counter-offered. You get half the journals now. The rest stay with us as insurance until Miss Jane's property is legally transferred and we're satisfied you've honored the agreement. Harrington's jaw tightened, but he nodded curtly. Acceptable, but I choose which half I receive. No, Amelia said firmly. I'll divide them. Half the information in each area, half the gold survey, half the railroad notes, half the water rights documentation. Neither portion complete without the other. Anger flashed across Harrington's face, quickly suppressed. You drive a hard bargain, Miss Jane. Your father would be proud." The words were meant to sting, but Amelia felt only a quiet vindication. "Very well. Divide them as you wish." Under the watchful eyes of both parties, Amelia carefully separated the journal pages, creating two incomplete but balanced sets of information. It pained her to destroy her father's meticulous work, but she understood the necessity. When she finished, she handed one set to Harrington, who examined the pages with barely concealed greed. "How do I know these aren't forgeries?" he demanded. "You know my father's hand," Amelia replied. "And you know his reputation for accuracy. That's why you wanted these in the first place." Harrington couldn't deny this. He carefully folded the pages and placed them in an inner pocket of his coat. "We have an agreement, then. I'll instruct my lawyer to transfer the Tennessee property back to Miss Jane immediately." "And the matter of our bride," Ethan pressed, his tone making the possessive "our" sound like an insult. A cold smile touched Harrington's lips. "Consider the engagement broken. Though I suspect you've already replaced me in that capacity, O'Malley." Neither Amelia nor Ethan rose to the bait, maintaining their united front as Harrington issued orders to his men. They would depart immediately, he instructed, seeing no reason to linger in such uncomfortable surroundings. As Harrington mounted his horse, he fixed Amelia with a final, calculating look. "You might have made a suitable wife after all, Miss Jane. Few women would have shown such initiative." "I'll take that as a compliment, Mr. Harrington," Amelia replied evenly. "Though I prefer my marriages without shackles." A shadow passed over Harrington's face at the reminder of how he had treated her. Without another word, he turned his horse and led his men away from the cabin, disappearing into the darkness of the forest. Ethan and Amelia remained motionless until the last sounds of hoofbeats had faded. Only then did Amelia let out the breath she'd been holding, her hands beginning to shake with delayed reaction. "You think he'll honor the agreement?" she asked, lowering the revolver. "Not willingly," Ethan admitted. "But we still have half the information he wants, and he knows we're willing to use it. Self-interest will keep him in line, at least for now." They returned to the cabin, both too keyed up for sleep despite their exhaustion. Ethan rebuilt the fire while Amelia secured the remaining journal pages. "What happens now?" she asked, the question encompassing far more than their immediate plans. Ethan looked up from the fire, his expression softened by the dancing flames. "That depends on what you want, Miss Jane." "Amelia," she corrected gently. "After everything we've been through, I think you can call me Amelia." A small smile touched his lips. "Amelia, then, the question stands." She considered carefully before answering. "I want to feel safe again. To build something that's mine that can't be taken away." She met his gaze directly. "But I don't want to return to Tennessee. There's nothing for me there now." "You could stay in California," Ethan suggested, his tone carefully neutral. "Land is still affordable in some areas. With the money from your father's property, you could start fresh." "I could," she agreed, "though I know little about ranching or farming in this climate." "You could learn." Ethan hesitated, then continued with uncharacteristic uncertainty. "My ranch has room to grow, good water, decent soil." "Too much work for one person." Amelia felt her heart quicken at the implications of his words. "Are you offering me a business arrangement, Mr. O'Malley?" "Ethan," he corrected, echoing her earlier words. "And no, not exactly." He moved to sit beside her at the table, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his blue eyes. "I'm not good with words, Amelia, but these past days, seeing your courage, your intelligence—" "Yes," she prompted when he faltered. "I find myself hoping you might consider staying. Not as a business partner, though you'd be welcome as that too, but because I've come to care for you in a way I didn't think possible anymore." The simple honesty of his declaration touched Amelia deeply. In the short time she had known him, Ethan O'Malley had shown her more respect and consideration than any man in her life since her father. He had cut her shackles, both literal and figurative, offering freedom instead of possession. "I care for you too," she admitted quietly, "but I need time. These past months have taught me to be cautious with my trust and my heart." "Time is something I can offer," Ethan said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "Along with my word that you'll always have choices with me, Amelia. Always." In that moment, with the fire crackling and dawn beginning to lighten the sky outside, Amelia felt the first real stirring of hope for her future, not just safety or security, but the possibility of happiness. "Then I accept," she said, squeezing his hand. "I'll stay for now. We'll see what grows from there." The smile that transformed Ethan's face was worth every hardship she had endured to reach this point. It spoke of possibilities neither of them had dared imagine just days ago, when he had found her shackled in a wedding dress. 6 months later, Amelia stood on the porch of their ranch house now, watching Ethan work with a young horse in the corral. The property had flourished under their combined efforts, the cattle herd growing, the vegetable garden expanded to include herbs and flowers. Harrington had kept his word, more or less. The deed to her father's property had arrived 3 weeks after their confrontation, along with papers officially dissolving any claim he had to Amelia herself. They had sent the remaining journal pages to the territorial governor anyway, as insurance against future trouble. The resulting investigation had diminished Harrington's influence, though not destroyed it entirely. More importantly, Amelia had found her place in this new life. She had learned ranching quickly, her natural intelligence and determination serving her well. The local community, initially suspicious of the Eastern woman with the mysterious past, had gradually accepted her, particularly after she organized a successful campaign to establish the area's first proper school. And her relationship with Ethan had deepened with each passing day. They had married in a simple ceremony 4 months after their escape from Harrington, with Samuel Wilson and his wife as witnesses. It was everything the forced marriage to Harrington would not have been chosen freely, based on mutual respect and growing love. Ethan looked up from his work, catching sight of her on the porch. His face brightened instantly, as it always did when he saw her. He secured the young horse and crossed to where she stood, removing his hat as he approached. "You're looking thoughtful," he observed, climbing the porch steps to stand beside her. Amelia smiled, leaning into him as his arm circled her waist. "I was thinking about shackles and knives, how sometimes freedom comes in unexpected ways." Ethan's expression softened with understanding. "Any regrets?" "Not one," she assured him, turning in his embrace to face him fully. "Though I do have news." "Good news, I hope." Amelia took his hand and placed it gently against her stomach, where the first subtle swell of new life was beginning to show. "The best kind. We'll need to add another bedroom by spring." Joy transformed Ethan's face, followed quickly by tender concern. "Are you feeling well? Do you need anything? I can ride for the doctor." Amelia laughed, cutting off his worried questions with a kiss. "I'm perfectly fine, better than fine." She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I never thought I could be this happy, Ethan, not after everything that happened." "Nor I," he admitted, holding her close. "After the war, I thought that part of me was dead, until you." They stood together on the porch of the home they had built, watching the California sunset paint the hills in gold and crimson. The future stretched before them, not without challenges, but rich with promise and possibility. The forced bride had found true love, and the cowboy who had cut her shackles had found healing for his own wounds. Together, they had forged something neither could have created alone, a life built on choice rather than coercion, on love freely given rather than demanded. As twilight settled over their ranch, Ethan led Amelia inside, closing the door on the approaching night. The lamp he lit cast a warm glow throughout the main room, now adorned with furniture they had selected together, and curtains Amelia had sewn from fabric they had chosen on a trip to Santa Barbara. "I have something for you," Ethan said, retrieving a small package from his desk drawer. "I've been waiting for the right moment." Amelia unwrapped the brown paper to find a small leather-bound journal, its pages blank and waiting. Embossed on the cover in simple gold lettering was her name, Amelia O'Malley. "For new beginnings," Ethan explained. "New stories, new surveys, new dreams. Whatever you want to record." Tears pricked at Amelia's eyes as she traced her fingers over the embossed letters. "It's perfect," she whispered. "Thank you." That night, as they lay together in the quiet darkness of their bedroom, Amelia reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From shackles to freedom, from fear to love, from loneliness to the promise of family. The path had been unexpected and often frightening, but she wouldn't change a single step that had led to this moment. In the years that followed, their family grew, first with the birth of their son, Robert, named for Amelia's father, and later with a daughter they called Sarah, after Ethan's mother. The ranch prospered, becoming known throughout the region for its fine horses and cattle. Amelia's garden expanded into a small orchard, providing fruit for the growing community around them. True to his word, Ethan always ensured that Amelia had choices in their life together. Major decisions were made jointly, their partnership equal in all things. The memory of iron shackles faded, replaced by the gentle bonds of love freely chosen, renewed each day in 1,000 small moments of care and consideration. And if anyone in Ventura ever wondered about the unusual couple at the O'Malley Ranch, the soft-spoken cowboy, who had once been a Confederate soldier, and the spirited Eastern woman who taught at the local school, 3 days a week, they never learned the full story of shackles cut by a knife, of journals divided, or of a forced bride who found true love in the wild hills of California. Some stories, after all, belong only to those who lived them. And this one, Amelia often thought as she watched her children play in the shadow of the mountains, was still being written, day by day, choice by choice, in the freedom of love unshackled.